I want to read to you the story of King Asa of Israel because I believe his story is very relevant to us Christians today. I read in 2 Chronicles chapter 14. So Abijah rested with his fathers and they buried him in the city of David. Then Asa his son reigned in his place. In his days the land was quiet for 10 years. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. For he removed the altars of the foreign gods and the high places, and broke down the sacred pillars, and cut down the wooden images. He commanded Judah to seek the Lord God of their fathers, and to observe the law and the commandment. He also removed the high places and the incense altars from all the cities of Judah, and the kingdom was quiet under him. And he built fortified cities in Judah, for the land had rest. He had no war in those years, because the Lord had given him rest. Therefore he said to Judah, Let us build these cities and make walls around them, and towers, gates, and bars, while the land is yet before us, because we have sought the Lord our God. We have sought him, and he has given us rest on every side. So they built and prospered. And Asa had an army of 300,000 from Judah, who carried shields and spears, and from Benjamin 280,000 men who carried shields and drew bows. All these were mighty men of valor. Then Zerah the Ethiopian came out against them with an army of 1,000,000 and 300 chariots, and he came to Mareshah. So Asa went out against him, and they set the troops in battle array in the valley of Zephatah at Mareshah. And Asa cried out to the Lord his God, and said, Lord, it is nothing for you to help, whether with many or with those who have no power. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rest on you, and in your name we go against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let man prevail against you. So the Lord struck the Ethiopians before Asa and Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. And Asa and the people who were with him pursued them to Gerar. So the Ethiopians were overthrown, and they could not recover, for they were broken before the Lord and his army. And they carried away very much spoil. Then they defeated all the cities around Gerar, for the fear of the Lord came upon them, and they plundered all the cities, for there was exceedingly much spoil in them. They also attacked the livestock enclosures and carried off sheep and camels in abundance, and returned to Jerusalem. So, you see, King Asa, he removed all the altars of the foreign gods, all the idols and the carved images, and he told the people to observe and to keep the law and the commandment of their God, of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he did what was right in the eyes of God. Apart from that, he also put his trust and he rested on God. He put his trust in God, and he prayed to God, and he asked for help from God. This is amazing. This is what we have to do today. Now the Spirit of God came upon Azariah the son of Oded, and he went out to meet Asa and said to him, Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be fine by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. For a long time Israel has been without the true God, without a teaching priest and without law. But when in their trouble they turned to the Lord God of Israel and sought him, he was found by them. And in those times there was no peace to the one who went out, nor to the one who came in. But great turmoil was on all the inhabitants of the lands. So nation was destroyed by nation and city by city. For God troubled them with every adversity. But you be strong, and do not let your hands be weak, and your work shall be rewarded. And when Asa heard those words and the prophecy of Oded the prophet, he took courage and removed the abominable idols from all the land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the cities which he had taken in from the mountains of Ephraim. And he restored the altar of the Lord that was before the vestibule of the Lord. Then he gathered all Judah and Benjamin, and those who dwelt with them from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, for they came over to him in great numbers from Israel, when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. So they gathered together at Jerusalem in the 3rd month, in the 15th year of the reign of Asa, and they offered to the Lord at that time 700 bulls and 7,000 sheep from the spoil they had brought. Then they entered into a covenant to seek the Lord God of their fathers with all their heart and with all their soul. And whoever would not seek the Lord God of Israel was to be put to death, whether small or great, whether man or woman. Then they took an oath before the Lord with a loud voice, with shouting and trumpets and ram's horns. And all Judah rejoiced at the oath, for they had sworn with all their heart and sought him with all their soul. And he was found by them, and the Lord gave them rest all around. Also he removed Maachah, the mother of Asa the king, from being queen mother, because she had made an obscene image of Asherah. And Asa cut down her obscene image, then crushed and burned it by the brook Kidron. But the high places were not removed from Israel. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was loyal all his days. He also brought into the house of God the things that his father had dedicated and that he himself had dedicated, silver and gold and utensils. And there was no war until the 35th year of the reign of Asa. In the 36th year of the reign of Asa, Baasha king of Israel came up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might not let none go out or come in to Asa king of Judah. Then Asa brought silver and gold from the treasuries of the house of the Lord and of the king's house, and sent to Ben-Hadad king of Syria, who dwelt in Damascus, saying, Let there be a treaty between me and you, as there was between my father and your father. See, I have sent you silver and gold. Come, break your treaty with Baasha king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. So Ben-Hadad heeded King Asa, and set the captains of his armies against the cities of Israel. They attacked Ijon, Dan, Abel, Maim, and all the storage cities of Naphtali. Now it happened when Baasha heard it, that he stopped building Ramah and ceased his work. Then King Asa took all Judah, and they carried away the stones and timber of Ramah, which Baasha had used for building, and with them he built Jeba and Mizpah. And at that time Hanani the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you have relied on the king of Syria and have not relied on the Lord your God, therefore the army of the king of Syria has escaped from your hand. Were the Ethiopians under Lubim not a huge army with very many chariots and horsemen? Yet, because you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. In this you have done foolishly, therefore from now on you shall have wars. Then Asa was angry with the seer and put him in prison, for he was enraged at him because of this. And Asa oppressed some of the people at that time. Note that the acts of Asa, first and last, are indeed written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And in the 39th year of his reign, Asa became diseased in his feet, and his malady was severe. Yet, in his disease, he did not seek the Lord, but the physicians. So Asa rested with his fathers. He died in the 41st year of his reign. They buried him in his own tomb, which he had made for himself in the city of David, and they laid him in the bed which was filled with spices and various ingredients prepared in a mixture of ointments. They made a very great burning for him. It's a great deal that we can learn from King Asa's story. We see how his heart was loyal to the Lord. He didn't worship any other gods. But in the first few years of his reign, he put his trust in God. He relied on God. However, in the later part, he took his trust from God and he placed it in man. Maybe in those years when he had peace, he made some friends, and acquaintances, and he started knowing people, and you said, you know what, maybe my friend, king of Syria, can help me in this fight against the Israel. Maybe it seemed logical for him to do that, and we can see that king of Syria actually helped them, and he sorted his problem. And many of us Christians today run to people, to friends for solutions, and maybe they fix our problem momentarily, but dear friends, we take our trust from God, and that's when our relationship with him stops. This is what the seer said to Asa. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. This is true loyalty, when we trust the Lord. Today it's we have to deal with this pandemic in the world, and many people, many Christians, unfortunately, don't trust God. They don't trust him. They run to people, as King Asa did. He went to physicians when he was sick. He didn't go to God. I mean, these shots that they give, they contain very, very dangerous things. They are made with cells from unborn fetuses, and unborn fetuses don't come from happy marriages. They mostly come from fornications and adultery. And this is a sin against the body. Also, unborn fetuses come from abortion. And abortion is also a sin against your own body. I don't know if it was very popular 2000 years ago when the Apostle Paul wrote, but it's very popular today. And many countries legalized abortion. It's a sin against your own body and a murder. You have 3 sins that you do against your own body. And dear friends, we are the temples of the living God. If I go to someone on the street and I say to someone, hey, come, get yourself vaccinated, they'll be like, what? No, I get myself vaccinated when I want to get vaccinated. Well, dear friends, even more we now, today, have to go to God, because we don't belong to ourselves. We have to ask God whether at least we have to ask him whether he wants us to get vaccinated. I don't know, I hope this video will last a bit longer on YouTube than my previous one, which was deleted, and I hope I already got a warning, but I hope it won't get deleted, this one also. Even more so than King Asa, we have to go to God and not accept to put in us something which is harmful. I had a dream from the Lord, and the Lord told me that this thing that they're giving the people, it's malicious, meaning it's with bad intention. And all this comes from Satan himself, because he wants the temple of God to be defiled, and he wants us to take our trust from God and put it in people. Many people seek after doctors and physicians. They get 1, 2, 3, even more shots of that thing they're giving them, and they just defile their temple. They don't get the permission from God. They don't run to Jesus Christ of Nazareth. They want to save themselves. They don't rely on Jesus to save them. Jesus is our Savior. He's our Redeemer. And we've been bought at a price. We belong to Him. And if something happens to the body, we have to ask Jesus, why? Why are we sick? And what we have to do? And Jesus, He's our healer. And if He wants to, He will heal us. I want to encourage you. I want to encourage all Christians to stop following the ways of this world. To stop following the ways that Satan wants us to follow. And we have to start relying on the Lord. We have to start trusting Him and seeking Him with all our heart, being loyal to Him with all our heart. May Jesus bless you.